Okay, so hopefully Sarah got you guys all interested in the Rosebud. You probably never knew the Rosebud River was so interesting in Wheatland County. A movie was filmed here, like a pretty famous movie. There's wild boar, there's all sorts of interesting things. It was actually a really cool project area to work in. Most of my work with cows and fish has been sort of more in the parkland and northern in the boreal portions. So to get to spend this time getting to know the landowners in the Rosebud and getting to spend the time walking through most of it was really interesting. It's a pretty neat little transition zone as it comes from that sort of flat land that Sarah was talking about to the coulee lands that we got to see in the end. So there was 12 different landowners that participated in the project with us, and that resulted in 15 different riparian health inventories on 15 different properties. So in total, we looked at about 17 kilometers of river length within within Wheatland County, and we probably walked about double that, I would think. Sarah sort of gave you that indication. All our riparian health work is done on foot, and most of our access is usually done on foot as well. So we don't ever take into account things like water quality. We don't do biodiversity sampling like bird work or that kind of thing. We focus on the riparian area itself, which is that land adjacent to flowing water, or it can be just areas where there's high water tables, or it can be around lakes and wetlands as well. They have riparian areas. So it's that area that has all that lush vegetation. So cattails, bulrushes, sedges, lots of our willows, trees and shrubs are found there. And then there's always those soils that are influenced by the water that's present. And of course, there's always water nearby somewhere. So when we do our riparian health work, we focus on that zone, and we look at two separate parameters, the first being vegetative health, and the second being sort of the soil hydrological health. So Sarah kind of gave you an indication of the project area itself. The line highlighted in green there is the distance that we looked at, and within that distance, we did those 15 representative sites. Each site generally is about a kilometer in length, so it can be usually within a quarter section, kind of fence line to fence line would be the distance we would do. We always try and get endpoints where we do a lot of GPS work and photo benchmark work, but we always try and find some really good endpoints so that people can go back and remonitor these sites in the future. So for those of you that don't know a lot about the Rosebud, it actually originates west of the town of Carstairs. And it flows through central parkland, foothills fescue, northern fescue, natural subregions, and then it joins the Red Deer River at the community of Rosedale, just downstream from us here a ways. Like Sarah said, it's primarily agricultural lands, native and tame pasture, as well as irrigated and non-irrigated cropland. And then that interesting abrupt change that occurs in Wheatland County made it a little bit more difficult for site selection. We had to make sure that we were getting enough sites that were coulee influenced, as well as some of those more flat and meandering systems as well.
Where is that in relationship to Rosebud?
The river from the town, you crossed it before if you came from the north, you would have crossed it before you entered the town, right? Or is it to... Sorry, it's been a while since I looked at the Wheatland County map.
What? If you came from the south, you would have driven over it.
Yeah. Sorry, I had that backwards.
And it's just over there.
Was Rosebud on there, or?
It is, and it is right. I can show you. That's Redland. Rosebud is right there.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's hard to see. So Sarah kind of gave you a bit of a picture of what we found. For the 15 sites in Wheatland County, it scored 74%. And at that time, looking at the provincial average of our data, that's about 1997 to 2010. That was probably somewhere, I think at that time we were around 1,900 sites that Cows and Fish has done in the province. Our provincial average was around 69% at that time. So it scored just slightly above, which is positive. So in looking at it overall, breaking those sites down, for those of you that have done any work with cows and fish, you probably know that we have these 3 categories: healthy, healthy with problems, and unhealthy. So a healthy site means that all those vegetative and soil and hydrological parameters are intact and working properly, and I'll get into a few of those in a bit. The other end of the spectrum, the unhealthy, means that there's a lot of impacts that are occurring, and there's a lot of ecological function that isn't occurring any longer, and that healthy with problems is sort of somewhere in the middle. So based on scoring on that previous one, just down here at the bottom, healthy is anything over 80%, healthy with problems is 60 to 79, and then unhealthy is anything less than 60. So in the field, we collect about an 80-question form, and it gets boiled down into something like this, about 11 different questions in the database. So all of the field work that we do in the summer, it gets plunked into a database in Lethbridge, churns it, spits it out, whatever. I try and stay away from the database as much as possible. It scares me. So it spits out these 11 questions for loadic or flowing water systems. So it's not important that you read this, but what is important is that you can see that there's about twice as many green strips as there are red strips. So the red ones were the things that we found, the parameters that were unhealthy. The green ones were the healthy ones, and the yellow ones were those ones in the middle. So vegetatively, it was scoring around 73%, and the soil hydrology parameters were around 75, so right close to that 74 average. So if we were to break it down and have a peek at some of these different parameters, the first one that we assess is just overall vegetation cover. So what's there, at this point it doesn't matter if it's weeds or disturbance plants or native plants. We're just getting a feel for how much cover is out there. And overall, we found a pretty good diversity and abundance of plants there. Over 175 different plant species identified, including 4 trees. Those, of course, were more in the downstream portions. 22 shrubs, 38 grasses and grass-likes, and the grass-like part includes sedges into that family there, and 111 forbs or broadleaf plants, so those are your wildflowers. And about 74% of those were native species, which is positive. We also break this down further and have a look at some of our invasive plants. Cows and Fish goes by the Weed Act, what's listed on the Weed Act. But then there's a few other species that we add in that we know are problematic in riparian areas, and one of those was found here, and that was common carrigana. It was only found on one site. The other 2 they were found on every site: Canada thistle, perennial sow thistle. I think Canada thistle is found probably in our database on 98% of the sites we look at. And then the other one that we saw that's pictured here is black henbane, and it was found on 10 sites. It was kind of the one that was least common, I guess, in terms of what we normally see on riparian sites. And then we break it down one step further and have a look at disturbance plants. So these are things like your dandelion, Kentucky bluegrass, foxtail barley, smooth brome, quackgrass, those kind of things. So they're providing cover, and they do provide forage at certain times of the year for livestock and for wildlife, but they tend to have really shallow root systems. So really shallow roots, and they're not going to hold our stream banks or river banks together as well as our native plants will. So overall, they covered about 38% of the project area, and the most predominant ones were smooth brome, quackgrass, Kentucky bluegrass pictured here, and white sweet clover was also prevalent. And then the other vegetative questions take a look at woody plants, so trees and shrubs. They covered about 46%, so almost half of our sites that we looked at. Again, more dominant in the downstream portions of it. And we look at woody plants, we try and get a measure of establishment, so seedling, sapling, regeneration, and that came out healthy. So there was good regeneration of trees and shrubs occurring in the watershed. And then browse or utilization, so how much is being taken by wildlife or livestock. And that one it fit into that middle category of healthy with problems. So then, if we move on to the sort of soil and hydrology, more of the physical parts of the assessment, one of the things that we look at is deep binding root mass. So of our river how much of the stream bank has really good deep binding roots coming from willows, trees and shrubs, so dogwood, that kind of thing. On something the size of the rosebud, you would expect that you may need some pretty good amounts of willow and trees in order to hold the banks together. On smaller systems, like the crowfoot, for example, we may only need some good native grasses. So some of the common willows we were seeing was sandbar willow, yellow willow. There was some water birch in the downstream portion, and red osier dogwood was pretty common as well. And but overall, when you looked at all the sites together, there was not great root mass protection. So that's just giving us an indication that there's potential for erosion to occur. The other thing that we look at is bare soil. And Sarah showed you this picture of the sediment load that the rosebud is able to carry when it's in a flood. So that was all in one season, one flood event, the sediment deposition that occurred. So sometimes bare soil is as a result of natural things. It could be drawdown or sediment deposition, but sometimes the bare soil, if we look at the lower portion of this, is also due to non-natural things, so livestock impacts. So bare soil in general was pretty limited, only about 3% of our project area, but about half of that, 3%, was due to livestock and half was there due to natural deposition. And then looking a little bit further into physical alterations. So what's occurring on our stream banks, and then what's occurring in the floodplain in terms of physical alterations. So this could be things like tillage that's occurring within your riparian area. In this picture here, a watering access site that's being used by livestock. So the stream bank alterations came out sort of in that healthy with problems category, and alterations within the floodplain zone were minimal. They were less and came out in the healthy category. And then the last thing we look at in terms of soil and hydrology is channel incisement. And this question is asking us, does our river, in this case, have access to a floodplain? During flood events, is it able to get out and spill out onto those banks and disperse moisture and disperse energy as it should? So what we're looking for, it's sort of a measure of, is it suitable to the stream size, the flow, the topography, and the gradient of the system? So in the most cases, incisement was minimal, especially in the downstream portions. On the upstream portions, there was a little bit of incisement, and you can picture an incised stream as being sort of like a box-like system. So it's down cut quite a ways, and it would take a lot of a really high flood event for it to get out. So there was a few sites, I think 5 of 15 sites. 4 were slightly incised and 1 was moderately incised. But overall, it came out healthy. So what does a healthy site look like? So this is a pretty good example of what a healthy site looks like. These are all young seedling willows in the front. We've got some nice trees and shrubs lining the bank, providing that root mass protection. Mostly native species, not a lot of weedy species in this one. So this is a pretty good example of a healthy site. And I should note that some of the healthy sites we did were non-use, but some of the healthy sites we did were also being grazed. So it's sometimes people have the misconception that in order to have a healthy riparian site, we have to have it being non-use, but we do, landowners are able to maintain healthy sites with grazing, which is positive. So a healthy with problems, so this is the one that sort of fits in that middle portion. So you can see, or you can't see, depending on how it looks to you back there. There's a bit of a cow trail here, so a bit of trailing that's occurring. Less trees and shrubs overall. There's a bit more weedy species, some thistles and stuff along the bank, and a bit more disturbance species. But overall, physical alterations aren't too bad, and it's not incised, so that comes out in the middle. And then the last one, an unhealthy site. Seeing a lot of use from livestock, quite a lot of bare soil here, lots of trailing, watering access points, crossings, that kind of thing. Vegetation primarily is, there are a bit of shrubs on the far bank, but lots of disturbance and kind of weedy species there. So just to give you some perspective on the 3 types. So the other thing we did with this project area when we reported on it was just to split the data almost in half. looking at downstream of Serviceberry Creek and upstream of Serviceberry Creek. Downstream, if we took all the sites that we did downstream, I think there was 6 of them. Yeah, 6 sites downstream of Serviceberry to Range Road 200. It would come out in the healthy category, 84%, and splitting it, looking upstream up to Range Road 250. Those 9 sites come out at 67%, so healthy with problems. So you can definitely see that that topography, where it's limiting the amount of use that the river is seeing, is also influencing the health. So then, what do we do next? What are some of our goals? And I think for the Rosebud, some of the goals would be to definitely maintain those healthy reaches. There is, from that Serviceberry Creek, where it enters downstream, it's quite a large tract of land that's intact and healthy. It's providing a lot of wildlife habitat, potentially some fish habitat, but we didn't hear too many fish stories from landowners when we were there. So I think maintaining those healthy reaches is important, whether that's just through identifying some good news stories where there is some management occurring in those areas. There was one conservation easement that NCC owns in that area, and whether that's something that some of those landowners might be interested in. So just maintaining that intact habitat, it's a pretty good length of it, and that would be a priority. Continue to work with the private landowners. So Sarah and I did some one-on-one meetings at the beginning of the project, and then we did some one-on-one meetings at the end of the project. And hopefully continuing to work with those landowners to improve some of those reaches that fell into the healthy with problems or the unhealthy category. So Sarah's got that excellent program at the county that can help them with projects like off-stream watering, looking at implementing fencing rotation, timing, distribution, and then taking a look at the buffers that are there between the cropland and those riparian sites is important as well. And then next steps, again, just reiterating that one-on-one follow-up with landowners is kind of important. This was the first time that, if you guys know the history of cows and fish, we used to do a lot of work, and we still do, with watershed groups and community groups. But now we're also doing a lot of work of this fashion with municipalities. And so this was the first time that I actually brought the municipal staff person along with me when I did the landowner contacts, because Sarah was keen to do it. And it was really valuable to have both the municipal influence there as well as the cows and fish influence there to meet with the landowner and collect the data and have both of those resources that the landowner was able to access. I think it'll be important to monitor riparian health over time. Sarah alluded a little bit to the fact that cows and fish had done some riparian work on the Rosebud with, there used to be a watershed group, the Rosebud River Watershed Partners, and we'd done a bit of work with them in the past. So hopefully between the municipality and maybe with some of these keen landowners, we can continue to monitor and see if there's a trend in health over time. We were able to do some additional work on Crowfoot Creek this summer within Wheatland County, which was also interesting. And the results of that are just out. I saw Sarah had it posted on her website. And I think for the Rosebud itself, I think it might be interesting to get a better picture of what's occurring representative within the watershed rather than just within Wheatland County. The sites that we selected and the data that I've presented to you is what we feel representative for Wheatland County, but definitely not representative for the entire Rosebud itself. So that's it. If you guys have any questions, that's our contact information up there. And I'm happy to answer questions now too, if you like. Tom.
Did you find places where there are groundwater seeps coming out, particularly downstream of Serviceberry Creek, I suppose, that influenced the flow regime of the river?
Yeah, there was a few. That is one of the things that we collect on our forum is seeps and springs. I didn't tally that, but I know from the sites that Sarah and I did that there were a few seeps and springs in those coulees for sure that we came across.
And how did that influence your assessment of that particular area?
It still gets, as long as it's, depending on the location, it gets included within, because it's usually still riparian within your riparian site. If it's a really large seep or spring and it extends a long way up into the coulee or something, we may have to just cut off part of it and kind of just draw a line partway through it. But in general, we try and do an inclusive riparian width. So a lot of the time, it's not a good photo to see, but a lot of the time we were like encompassing a lot of that coulee bottom within our riparian width.
And what's the total length of Rosebud River that is within Wheatland County?
I didn't do that math. We kind of did a rough estimate when we started the selection, didn't we?
Yeah, it's hard because you have to go with GIS paper and measure all those meanders.
But I know when we started to do the selection, we kind of took a guess at how much, and that's how we got to the 15 sites, because we guessed that 15 would be representative for the length of what the river, but I can't remember what that is now. Good question though. That's.
How big, got a couple questions. How big are your sites?
Yeah, in length, they're usually about 1 kilometer in length. They're always within one management unit. So say a farmer has the river flowing through the middle of a quarter section, and it's just fenced on the quarter section line, we would do the entire length. If he's got a cross fence in there somewhere, then we treat that as 2 different management units. So it would end up being 2 sites or just one. And width, we base it on topography, vegetation. So we try and find where that fine boundary between upland and riparian is. So for the Rosebud, I have the data in my bag. I didn't look that up before we came, but I think some of the sites that we did downstream were wider. They were probably more like up to 100 meters on one side, perhaps, and then on the upstream portions, it was a lot more narrow, so maybe 15 meters on each side.
It was a random selection of sites?
We aimed for representative selection, and we did that by looking at land use throughout the watershed in the county itself, and tried to get representative. So looked at what % of land use was cropped, what % was grazing, what % was non-use, and tried to get representative sampling within that.
And what would you do, like when you look at the river, there's obviously these pretty erodible type soils you're going to end up with because of flood exposed areas and so on. Would you actually put a site there, or would you move the site when you hit those sites?
Yeah, that's part of the site selection for sure. We try and get something representative, and usually if there's a small, we call it a hot spot within a site, like a erodible area or a watering access point or something like that, because you're doing such a long length, it tends to become representative no matter what. But if the whole, on a river system in particular, because it's eroding on the outside bend, depositing on the inside bend, we try and get 2 full meander cycles, so 2 full S-curves. So you're getting equal eroded outside bends, equal inside bends within your study.
Can you explain to me again what an incised stream is? Is that a good thing or a bad thing when a stream?
Sorry, yeah, maybe that wasn't clear. A bad thing. So every river and stream has a floodplain, right? And that floodplain has a purpose, and that purpose is to basically accept all of that water during a flood, reduce the energy, allow some infiltration to occur. And so when a stream is incised or down cut, so it's cut through its channel bottom, and it's a lot lower from its floodplain. It doesn't have access to its floodplain during a normal year. So there's a few different levels of incisement, like slightly, moderate, and quite or heavy. I don't know what the one is, but
I'm just wondering what the word meant. Was it?
Yeah, bad, down cut. Don't like to see it. Yeah, usually leads to more erosion and yeah. Phil.
This might be for either Sarah or yourself. I'm just curious about the influence of irrigation and return flows for the Rosebud, because the serviceberry gets quite a bit of irrigation water through it. And, I know that irrigation districts are continually trying to be more efficient and having less return flows, probably because they're licensed farmers and that, and trying to expand. If the flows continue to be decreased to the river, would you expect the riparian area to change and maybe even some more incisement to happen due to that? Or is this...
It's something to consider. In the Rosebud, we didn't notice it as much as we did this summer with the work we did in the Crowfoot. The Crowfoot is the water flow regime, because of irrigation, has significantly changed. It's not supporting a very good riparian plant community because it doesn't have water at the right times of year sometimes, or it doesn't sustain water throughout the year. In the Rosebud, we didn't notice it as much of a difference, and I think it's because after the serviceberry, because it does enter into this large sort of badland coulee formation, and it has a little bit more room to move, perhaps. It seemed that the year we were there, although the landowners had indicated there had been a couple years of good floods, it seemed that it was supporting a good riparian plant community in those downstream portions, and it looked like it had been for quite a while because they were fairly mature communities. But definitely upstream portions, I think you might see a little bit more of that, and on the Crowfoot, significant impacts from irrigation and lots of incisement and difficult to manage.
Cool.
I'm just curious on serviceberry. Did you do anything on Hartel Coulee, or is it this part of the serviceberry?
No, we didn't do any work on the serviceberry. No, we have in the past. We've done a few sites in the past on the serviceberry, but I can't remember where or how many. I'd have to look it up for you.
So did I hear you say that the local stewardship group is no more? You said there was?
Yeah, there was the Rosebud River Watershed Partners, and as far as I know, they are no longer an active group. They may still have their society status, but I don't think they're doing much. I don't know, Phil, if you have kept in touch at all since. No, they were fairly active for a long time. Phil was quite involved.
The county, I know, was trying to still continue work in that area, but they're...
Yeah, I haven't heard anything from them.
Yeah, because they used to do a float down the river every year and a winter event, and I haven't seen them advertise those for a couple years.
Just out of curiosity, that deposit bank, how high was that?
It was, Sarah, was that deposit bank as tall as us? It was big. Yeah, and like Sarah there was where she showed you that debris in the tree. She was standing on the bank, so above water level by a couple feet, and she couldn't even point, like, to touch where that debris was. It was a lot of water that was moving down there. So it's, interesting system.
Did you do any water quality testing?
No, our inventory protocols don't, we don't look at any water quality or biodiversity sampling whatsoever. So it's, Sarah has done some in the past.
Starting with Bill, there was probably like 10 years of water quality monitoring, but not for the last probably 3 or 4 years.
But it's, if there are funds available, it's often a good thing to do in partnership with a health inventory, because you can kind of play with that data a little bit.
That upstream portion from where it meanders so much, was there quite a few vehicle crossings or plant crossings?
It wasn't too many. There was maybe a couple.
There's a couple siding crossings.
There was a couple, like there was 1 or 2 I could think of, like vehicle kind of crossings, but otherwise not too much in terms of like stock dams, that kind of thing going on, or crossings. Yeah, it's pretty, a lot of the distance is pretty soft bottomed, so you'd have to enforce it, and yeah, you'd have to. We often couldn't find a place, like a rocky spot to cross. So.
Doesn't the WID maintain some water quality monitoring on portions of both serviceberry and Hartel too?
I think they do.
Maybe they do.
I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure.
They
you're
must.
right.
Yeah. We tried to work with them a little bit this year when we did the Crowfoot Creek work, but we didn't get a lot of response from them.
So the Hartel Coulee that they're talking about, where's that in relation to this sample? Because I know where Hartel is, and it's over south of, but that's probably a different place.
I don't know.
It's comes under highway number 1 and then it goes north.
And it's in the Serviceberry Creek?
So, yeah, and it flows north. And Hartel Creek is essentially, how many miles, 1, 2, 3, 4 miles west. Is what they call that, as Hartel Creek. And then it feeds north, back in the Serviceberry.
Because the community Hartel is some more, but it used to be south of 30,000.
No,
This doesn't go anywhere near that first.
no, we just have a, just east of, west of Stratford on the highway along where industrial, there's a coulee, where, that's the Hartel family. And so it's a long history because our father used to be rodeo. Bob Hartel, yeah, that's where Bob's farm is. So that's why they call it Hartel coulee, they own land on both sides. And that's where it feeds, and it feeds from Wheat Lake, I believe, is it not?
Yeah.
From Wheat Lake.
Wheat Lake, and that's,
One more. I'm just curious about the landowner interest in, you know, maybe using this information to make changes or questions.
Yeah, we had really good response. Yeah, we had 400 colonies participate, and they were really receptive to both Sarah and I coming on to their properties and chatting with them. In some cases, they were more keen than some of the other landowners. In the downstream portions, because there was a lot of non-use, the landowners, they were cropping on the tops of the coulees, and mostly their response was, well, if you can get down there, well, if you can get down, you can do whatever you want. So, but definitely in those upstream portions. And Sarah's been working with them to do a couple applications for like portable shelters or off-stream watering. And I think the one holdup was she was waiting on a couple of them to finish their EFP first before they could go through the process. But they definitely were responsive to us coming back and suggesting some management changes that might work. So.
Thank you very much, Sarah.